Okay. I think we can start.
I start?
Yeah.
Okay. Warmly welcome to this plenary session. My name is Tinna Joné. I'm your moderator for today's panel. I work as assistant professor in documentary storytelling at Stockholm University of the Arts. Following the International Sustainable Development Research Society seminar series in 2020, Andree Robitaille, PhD candidate at Stockholm University of the Arts, invited a group of researchers from the Swedish Defense University, Stockholm School of Economics, Stockholm University, and Södertörn University to meet around the notion of vulnerability in relation to situation of crisis. In 2021, through discursive activities, the group collectively looked at how the notion of vulnerability is understood and manifested in their respective fields, and how possible new practices could be initiated, practices that might help align vulnerability with a more sustainable and fairer world. For the next 30 minutes, Marie will introduce her project as a part of her doctoral artistic research project, Circus as Practices of Hope, at Stockholm University of the Arts. The presentation will be followed by a 30-minute plenary session, including researchers Emma Stenström from Stockholm School of Economics and Malena Britz from the Swedish Defense University. Andree Robitaille is an artist based in Sweden, currently doctoral candidate in performative and mediated practices at Stockholm University of the Arts. She has worked as a circus artist with Circus Circeur, among others, and as a talent scout for Cirque du Soleil. From 2009 to 2018, she was an assistant professor and head of the bachelor program at Circus in SKH. And in her previous artistic research projects, she investigated the representation of women in circus, sonic interactions, and sense perception. And in her doctoral project, Circus as Practices of Hope, she focuses on alternative modes of composition as a method to support the emergence of post-human practices in circus arts. So please, Marie.
Thank you, Tinna. Hello. Hello, everyone. Hello. As Tinna was saying, I'm based at Stockholm University of the Arts, and at Stockholm University of the Arts, we provide education and we conduct research in the field of circus, dance pedagogy, film, media, opera, performing arts, and acting. And we conduct research through artistic practices. Through our educational and research environment, we aim to increase the power of the arts in society. The university has about 500 students and 250 employees. And here would be a little bit of repeat. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and I have toured the world as a circus performer, as a stunt woman, and as a dancer, with notably Circus Circeur, who is contemporary circus company. I've worked as a talent scout for the casting team at Cirque du Soleil, and I was the head of the bachelor program in circus at Stockholm University of the Arts, just before I started as a doctoral candidate in performative and mediated practices in circus choreography, very specialized. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the circus. Oops, we go back. So here. My doctoral project is in response to the planetary context that we find ourselves in at the present moment on the planet, which have us standing at the convergence of the fourth industrial revolution and the sixth mass extinction, and this including the concrete experience of technological acceleration, the global warming, a world pandemic, and increasingly complex socio-political turmoils. I believe that specific mode of knowing and meaning in circus arts may contribute to the developing of abilities and tools for coping and for initiating the change, the radical change that we ought to perform, and also to help us navigating this significant contemporary paradigm shift. Circus artists are good at dealing with indeterminacy and precarious situation. On the theater board, you have to land on a small part of the apparatus. You can be injured and even die if you miss. When touring with and performing in the circus tent, you need to attune to the weather. We work collaboratively when it comes to safety, while spotting and catching each other. We work with proprioception and other senses to locate bodies in space and to control movement, thus enabling us to perform complex body trajectories. Circus is an embodied practice manifesting in real time and in presence. Hence, circus require adaptation, presence, and the assessment of risk. Circus also requires creativity. We do things a bit differently than in the day-to-day life. We generate alternative ways of encountering the world and thinking about human ability. Circus art helps us to imagine and experiment in ways that pushes the boundaries of what is considered to be normally possible. In circus performance, we also often reinforce a humanist narrative of an autonomous, independent, and dominating agent through super-heroic protagonists able to control and master their environment for their own glorification. The search for this familiar manifestation of virtuosity creates tricks and illusions that are mainly perpetrated for the sake of risk and triumph. It is this perspective that I propose to challenge in my artistic circus practice and in my pedagogies. I'm asking, are there other virtuosities that meet the challenge of our time? What can be learned about our modes of presence and engagement in the world when the circus artist recognizes and integrates vulnerability in circus composition and in performance rather than aiming at transcending it? On the road to today's conference, following the first interdisciplinary seminar organized by the ISDRS committee in December 2020, I invited a group of researchers to meet around the thematic of vulnerability. Many researchers accepted the invitation, and we soon became a group of about 10 researchers from the Swedish Defense University, the University College of Stockholm, Södertörn University, the Stockholm School of Economics, and also Uppsala University. Since January 2021, we have met around 10 times, and each of us has presented a lecture. And in each lecture, we spoke about how vulnerability was manifesting in our own respective research. And each lecture was followed by conversation. So here are a few of the ideas that were exposed and discussed throughout the process. We started by looking at circus acts and discuss where virtuosity was located, how risk was manifesting, and how mastery is embodied. Fredrik Albert is a senior lecturer in political science at the Swedish Defense University, and she conducts research at the Center of Natural Hazard and Disaster Science, Fredrik is working with risk analysis in situation of crisis. She said, after watching this video when we were discussing, the biggest possible degree of security is aimed at in circus, with, for example, mattress and safety nets, and a lot of practice and a lot of repetition. In real life, for vulnerable groups, they may be affected by a crisis, and they also have to perform extraordinary tasks. It is like that vulnerable groups also have to perform similarly demanding tasks during crisis, but they do so without safety net and without previous practices. Sarah Bondenson holds a PhD in political science from the Department of Government at Uppsala University. She's also an assistant professor at the Department of Security, Strategy and Leadership at the Swedish Defense University. She spoke in her presentation to participatory process and the use of power by climate justice and activist organizer in post-disaster context. In the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy in Rockaway, New York City, she noted that differences, may then be gender, race, and class, as well as age, able-bodiedness, sexual orientation, or gender identity, leads to situated marginalization. After a presentation, we came to discuss the relevancy and necessity to pay particular attention to situated marginalization, given that post-disaster contexts may become the new normal. And more questions were raised then. How can we work with vulnerabilities more fairly and sustainably? how to work with differences without weaponing them. Liamovic is a PhD candidate at the Department of Education at Stockholm University in Sweden. In her research, she studied the different philosophical understanding of the concept of human dignity and their relation to education, and more specifically, the implication for child-adult relationship.
Sama lor cycle सिकेको छु रिङ डान्स सिकेको छु बम्बु सिकेको छु टार्की सिकेको छु
After a presentation, we discussed how the notion of dignity is often linked to virtuosity, capability, and ability of the students we are teaching. It made us think of what type of virtuosity we promote through our research and through our teaching. Should virtuosity be inclusive, excluding, exceptional? Or should virtuosity be something accessible and achievable by all? The notion of exceptionalism is linked to the notion of dignity. Arita Unberg is a researcher at the Department of Security, Strategy and Leadership at the Swedish Defense University. Arita explored vulnerability of children in relation of climate crisis. One of her research explored children resistance in relation to the climate emergency, which was done through a thematic analysis of climate activist Greta Thunberg speeches. Her studies situate children protest in relation to the climate emergency as a new form of resistance, promoting political and social change. After a presentation, we discussed rhetorics and narrative around the climate changes, and the need to find new vocabulary and maybe new strategies in public engagement, and new aesthetics in order not to only understand that there is an emergency, but also to sense and feel it. Katarina Wadsten-McLeod is a professor of art history at Southern University. In her research, she studied how climate change is depicted in image, in art, visual culture, and media. And the link that there is between specific historical context and the production of knowledge. She draws parallels between how climate changes look today. And her question she draws parallel with how climate change is represented today in the media, but with 19th century representation, of weather and climate, like in this expedition of the Arctic in 1838. After a presentation, we discussed further the representation of climate change in collective imaginaries. We discussed the importance and difficulty to elaborate narrative that are not one based on apocalyptical scenarios, or at the opposite, one based on climate denial. We discussed the divide generated by these different ideologies. Emma Stenström is Associate Professor and Director of the Research Center for Arts, Business and Culture at Stockholm School of Economics. She presented to us bubble hopping as a method to bridge differences. So far, over 400 undergraduate and graduate students from the Stockholm School of Economics have met with imams and priests, artists and activists, drug dealers and prostitutes, people from affluent and marginalized suburbs, homeless people and millionaires, in an exercise called bubble hopping. Emma explained to us that bubble hopping requires the development of specific skills, like listening, asking questions, and sharing. And we did so realize that that is exactly what we were trying to do better: listening, asking questions, and sharing. In fact, at the time I was myself working with bubbles. An overarching entry point to the process of my doctoral artistic project have been to attempt to shift from anthropocentric circus making to practices that take significant consideration of the more than human forces in circus composition. And during the pandemic, since I could not work with other people in the studio, I found myself alone with bubbles and foil. The bubbles are in the shape of dodecahedron, and they are designed by Rachel Wingfield. They remind us of the shape of a virus and many other shapes and patterns that can be found in living systems. I'm also working with foil. Foil is a participant in the human ambition to explore, protect, and conquer. First developed by NASA, the material is used to protect Earth-made crafts from the harsher environment in space. I came to notice the foil when watching TV in 2015 at the Paris terror attacks. And since then, I have been working with this spectacular material. Manufactured as safety blankets, foil has been used in survival kits. Hospitals use them in the chill environment of operating theaters. And foil is used after natural disaster, such as earthquake and terrorist attack. So through this artistic practice process and with engaging in an interdisciplinary conversation on vulnerability, I was able to revise in my own artistic practice what qualifies as risk, how mastery is embodied, and where virtuosity is located. And by engaging from a less dominating posture, the virtuosic gesture moves away from the spectacularism of my ability to master and manipulate the objects, and it transforms in the ability for listening, phasing, and caring. And as the world started to open again, so did new aesthetics, potential new narratives, new patterns, a new circus practice. On July 6, 1944, the circus artist was preparing to perform in a matinee show of the Ringling Brothers Circus for an audience of 6,000 people in Hartford, Connecticut, USA. The show was 20 minutes in when the flames started. For waterproofing purpose, the tent canvas has been coated in paraffin and gasoline. The flames spread across the top quickly. As the men were at war at the time, the audience was mainly composed of women and children. 167 people died, about 700 were injured. This is known as the Hartford Circus disaster. During the fire, Ralph Emerson photographed clown Emmett Kelly. The clown Emmett Kelly is carrying a bucket of water towards the fire. The picture is breaking the fourth wall, but I can take it down a little bit. The volume. Yes. The picture is breaking down the fourth wall, but only in reverse. In this situation, the clown in the bucket is not in the tent, inside the ring, scaring the audience, if you know this old trick of the clown with the bucket that will come into the audience and pretend to throw water at you, but then comes confetti. In this situation, the clown is outside the tent, there is real water in the bucket, and the circus is on fire. The music that you hear is entitled Stars and Stripes Forever. It is a patriotic march of the US, the United States of America. Historically, in show business, and particularly in theater and in circus, the piece is called the Disaster March. In the early 20th century, when it was common for theater and for circus to have their own house band, this march was a traditional code for signaling life-threatening emergency. It subtly notifies the personnel in the circus that there is an emergency and it is time to evacuate without alarming the audience, which is not supposed to know. So except for impending disaster, circus bands never played a tune under any other circumstances. It is a clear signal. I'm wondering, what is our collective disaster signal? From his art installation, Flag for No Nation, artist James Bridle said in 2016, "A single technology, the vacuum deposition of metal vapor onto a thin film substrate, makes its consecutive and multiple appearances in times of stress. These are moments of hope as well as failure, moments when properly utilized, technological progress enable us to achieve something which was beyond our capabilities before, and yet we are still pulling bodies from the water wrapped in material which was meant to send us in space." The project Vulnerability as Virtuosity bounds from the idea that the game is not over. The current crisis we face forces us to revise what it means to be human today. And it also forces us, circus artists, to ask, how can circus be relevant in this necessary revision? If one can equate circus to divertissement, as in the ability to divert, perhaps circus can be a constructive diversion to focus on the hidden, the unheard, the unseen, the misunderstood. By diverting us from the illusion of control over our environment, we may bring attention to vulnerability as a tool to nurture other types of virtuosities. It is in understanding the importance of vulnerability that we may be better able to appreciate humans' delicate and fragile relation with all living and non-living beings. And in engaging vulnerability as virtuosity, there is an attempt to nurture hope for the future. I would like to thank all the researchers that has engaged in conversation with me: Frédéric Albrecht, Arita Onberg, Lindy Newlove Erickson, Sarah Bodenson, Katharina Watstern-McLeod, Anissa Newman, Emma Stenström, Lia Molvik, Malena Britz, and special thanks to the ISDRS committee, organizer team, for having us here today, and all the staff and the student that has participated in all our institutions. As a starting point to this project, we have asked the question, how the notion of virtuosity, of vulnerability, is understood and manifesting throughout our different disciplines. As a continuation in 2022, the members of the group wish to pursue discussion with a focus on embodiment. How can we develop mindful and embodied relationship to climate change? How can theory be enacted in practice? And moreover, how may practice inform theory? Through transdisciplinary discursive and artistic practice, we want to explore how rhetoric and narratives around climate crisis, human vulnerabilities, performance, human activities could be transformed and action embodied. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And now we have time for a panel, and we hope also to have time to invite you as an audience for questions. Short introduction. You have super impressive CV, so I will make them a bit shorter now, sorry. Emma Stenström is Associate Professor and Co-Director of Center for Arts, Business and Culture. She has always worked with bridging different spheres, in particular arts and business. Ongoing research projects include an action research project on bubble hopping, as you heard, and 2 different collaborations, bridging circus and management, the Sphere and Theater Trust. She is involved from the start in the initiative Inner Development Goals. And Malena Britz holds a PhD from Stockholm University and is Associate Professor in Political Science at the Swedish Defence University, Pro-Vice Chancellor and Head of Research. Since 2018, she has worked with developing systems for systematic quality development of both education and research at the Swedish Defence University. Her role as head of research includes, among other tasks, communication with the Swedish Armed Forces on commissioned research. Her areas of research include different aspects of European security policy, Europeanization? Thank you, and Nordic cooperation. Yes, she's written many books and so much to say, but let's go to the subject. Can I start with the question? Yes, okay. I have questions here from Marie to both of you, and I will start with Emma. You have been part of the process of this project, and you're working as a co-director of this center, but can you please share with us your impressions and thoughts on transdisciplinary context, such as when economic meets circus arts?
Yeah, that's a big question. But of course, I am I'm a firm believer that it really helps, especially for complex problems, like what we are facing today. And I think this collaboration we had was a good example. We didn't do so much together. We didn't write, at least not yet, together, which would be interesting. But I think it was really fruitful to meet and focus on a topic like we did, vulnerability, and then actually say, how do we address that in our different disciplines? And I don't know, I love collaborations like that. And I've been lucky to work with the circus arts, and I have 2 projects with circus right now. And I think it brings in aspects and dimensions that we never address in business administration and management theory that I come from, an organization theory, the embodied aspects, of course, but also just both psychological and philosophical, of a way of relating to each other, but also a way of relating to the world. I think it's super important. It's super fun. It just, you walk out of those collaborations with a fresh sense, and it's not always the case, I think, in academia. But it's not easy, and it's not easy when you publish, etc. But that's another story. I'll save that for now.
Okay, thank you. And Malena, you were not part of the process, but kindly accepted to join the panel today in order to honor the participation of the 5 researchers from the Swedish Defence University, which have been contributing consistently and with true enthusiasm to the project. After being introduced to the project, what are your impressions on why circus art triggers such a vivid interest from the researchers of the Swedish Defence University to join the think tank?
Yes, it's a very interesting question. I think actually I have 2 answers to that. One is that in social sciences in the last years, particularly in political science, but also in sociology and other social sciences, there has been theoretically what's called the practice turn, where people start to, when they study, for example, a process, a political process, decision making, it's also, international decision making, diplomacy, those kind of things. They start to focus on the practice in their research. So theoretically, there has been a moment from sort of the actual decisions, outcomes, power, and looking at the practices of how is this done? What does it mean for the outcomes? What does it mean for power relationships? So I think that is one reason. The other reason I think comes from my own institution, the Swedish Defence University, where we have a subject which is called war studies, which is, we are the only, I mean, war studies is a subject that exists in other parts of the world, particularly in the Anglo-Saxon world, but we are the only university in Sweden who has this as an academic subject. And obviously when you're going to bring in a very practical a very practical profession like war, and sometimes called the art of war, into the academic environment to become just a subject like anybody else, any other subject, then you meet a lot of new ideas, a lot of controversies on what is really science, how do you study things. And so I think that is something that I guess that you struggle with when you study circus as well, as from an academic point of view. So my guess is that experience of relating to something that isn't, perhaps in Sweden at least, hasn't been part of the academic world, and trying to figure out what place it has in academia and things like that. I think that's the reason why our researchers find it fascinating to discuss the issues with researchers from other areas, which are maybe not so traditional academically. I don't know, you have to answer to that, Marie, if that interpretation is true, but what you say about that?
It's so interesting for me.
Yes,
Should I bridge?
you can.
Yeah. To me, I mean, we are in a very unique situation. Do I have a microphone? Do you hear me well? Yes. We are in a very unique position in Sweden. We have a university where we can conduct research in circus arts. It's very specific to Sweden, and then one wants to benefit from the knowledge that has been built in all the other disciplines, and meet and discuss with the researcher from other discipline is truly the plus value of being, I think, in this context. Yes.
No, good.
Yeah. And to me, I was telling Malena earlier, I've been a circus artist for many years, and I've also done a lot of tracks and fields. I've done some competition before transiting to the arts. And at one point, when I left Sweden after touring with Circus Circar for many years, I left Sweden and went back to Canada. And I didn't have a job as an artist. It was really hard to sustain. And I became an agent to assist the police force in their investigations. So there were still a live situation there where I was with the civil servant doing real things, but I was really coming from the other end of the spectra, where I have worked in entertainment for all my life. And that meeting, this meeting between what can be abstracted and what can be imagined, but that never necessarily concretized in real life, but on stage. And this real life toughness and realness of things, I think we need to meet that, and we can speak of it as a theory and practice, or reality and fantasy, but somehow I'm after that bridge.
No, I was just curious. I've worked a lot also with bringing circus artists and management students together. And of course, I talk a lot about the circus at the business school all the time. And I meet like different reactions. But then I was curious about the audience. How many here who come from different universities and disciplines, how many here would be like triggered to engage in a circus project? See, yeah? Quite a few, huh?
Yes.
There is something that's so cute. I'm curious, like I would love to talk to all of you afterward, but it's also like there's something there, I think, with the circus especially. Mm-hmm. It's not only, I mean, transdisciplinarity is always interesting, but there's something with the circus too.
There's something there's something at stake with circus practice. Of course, we don't pretend to be so different from all the other art form, and diversity is something very important. But when it comes to circus, it happens in real life, on the moment, and there is a body involved, and there is risk involved. So I think that is where
risk, I think, is
Yes.
a place where we
Yes.
also meet, I think.
Yes, definitely. And also I was thinking of a third reason why researchers that might not be so obviously interested in circus have been part of this project, but it's also that there is this sense of urgency, I guess, in society right now. The climate changes bring this sense of urgency, natural disasters, war in Europe, and it sort of makes the researcher, they want to view old problems in a new way, I guess, and this is a way to view and reflect on these old problems that we should have solved by now. Why haven't we already solved this? So it brings this sense of urgency, also brings a willingness to and a curiosity about how can you view these old problems in a new way, and then I think that's also
and this morning there were so interesting panel at the beginning of the day, if you were here, and we were speaking of instrumentalization of arts, and I was asking myself, and I get the question often, like, oh, but don't you feel used by, because I'm investing in collaboration also with the sound and music computing team at KTH, at the Royal Institute of Technology here in Sweden. And often from the art perspective, we want to protect our practice and not be used. And I say, now there's maybe a moment where we have to use each other and be concrete and let go of this divide that there is between art and science and freedom. And I was reflecting this morning of, during the pandemic, we all accepted to restrict our own liberties in favor of the common good, in favor of protecting each other and caring for each other. So I think that sometimes this question of instrumentalization, I'm almost ready to jump and say, yes, but let's instrumentalize it to make some very concrete change and not just dream about the change. Dream is important though,
but I guess it depends also how you do it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, sometimes I'm also thinking, I think one of the reasons for why I like working with circus arts is also that it's not so easy to capitalize on. I'm thinking sometimes when we work with visual arts at the business school, it's just like another capital. They're gonna become even richer, those who are already so rich. And then I think circus arts is a little bit easier in that sense. It's not gonna be, at least, even making the super rich richer, which I don't think is what's necessary. And then, because then instrumentalization becomes difficult. But circus arts escapes that.
Well, of course, there is question of labor in circus also, but
absolutely. No, that it can happen. Cirque du Soleil is an example that where it happened.
Yeah, and it's never black or white.
No,
it's some people really want to work with Cirque du Soleil and have a steady job and be able to develop while they can, because I have been an acrobat and now I'm 48 years old, and my art I had to transform, my practice had to transform and follow what I was able to do. So the time of a career for a circus performer is rather short if you are doing acrobatics, for example.
But that makes me think of vulnerability. That is a notion that is understood and manifested so differently in each of your fields of expertise. So what are your thoughts on these different approaches? Maybe you would like to start, Malena.
Maybe Emma can start. Give me a couple of minutes to think.
I'll start. I think it depends. That's also I think that has to do with what we talked about before. One way of looking at it is as a researcher, Another way is looking at the field of business and leadership. And there I can sometimes become skeptical, critical towards the use of vulnerability today, because it's overused. I just heard about some CEOs going into theater training to be able to cry in front of, so they can show vulnerability, because it's been so popularized through like Brené Brown and people like that, that you have to be vulnerable in order to create connection, and then it becomes really manipulation. So I can be critical, but at the same time I can also see that when we are creating connections, of course there's
Yeah, no, I could, or you can.
Yeah. And in this context, also the way that the notion is welcome in this project was coming from a post-human perspective, the desire or the necessity to revise how do we behave as human, what do we consider to be human today, what it means to be human today. And the project foundation called for trying to stop this unvulnerable subject, the human that takes everything for its own glory or its, and start to start to identify the vulnerability that surrounds us. And I know you are all probably doing a lot of very serious work in this in this topic. So it's not that I'm saying anything new, but I think in terms of narrative, in terms of creation, in terms of us as artists on stage, bringing new imaginaries, bringing new image, bringing new narrative, we have to be careful of what it is that we are vehiculating. And I think now is the time also, if it wasn't before, to take in the context in which we are and the precarity that we are facing as human on Earth.
No, I was just thinking that both risk, as you were talking about, and threats, both to societies and to individuals, shows the vulnerabilities, both of societies and on an individual level. So in that sense, the risks and threats, when you put the spotlight on risk and threats, you also show the vulnerabilities that we have in societies.
Okay, maybe we have questions from the audience.
Or an impression,
or something you would like to share.
There's one over there.
While you're here we go. While you're thinking, I have an impression from the online part, and I'll then come to you, Glenn. Here's a comment. Deeply insightful presentation from Marie, which touches to the core. So much for us researchers to learn from artists and how we feel, embody, and signal urgency and vulnerability with the same immediacy. Glad that there are more and more crossing boundaries initiatives, which ISDRS is an example of. Thank you, Tatiana.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It was really great. I suppose my question is around the way risk is being presented as something that should be mitigated or something that implies vulnerability or threat. I'm wondering, to what extent have you discussed within the context of your work the intrinsic value of risk for creativity and education, and how that intrinsic value itself connects to another really important theme of this conference, which is courage. Because when I see those acrobats, I don't think really about vulnerability, I think about courage, the extent to which they are really brave. And I wonder if that comes into it at all. I think as an educator, that's something I could really learn from, the way that they take risks, the way that we can promote risks to students at a time whenever we are becoming very risk averse. and how courage might be something we might be able to talk about within that context.
Before you answer, Glenn, tell me where you are from and what more.
Oh, just a minute. My name is Glenn Loughran. I'm from TU Dublin. I'm an artist and an educator.
Thanks.
Thanks for the question. It's actually a nice coupling to think of risk in terms of courage. Did you want to?
No, I just want to say that I really appreciate that question. And obviously, I mean, in order to make human improvements, humans have to expose themselves to risks. Otherwise, you know, whatever area or field or level of individual or societal or whatever, it doesn't really improve unless you accept that there are risks and that you actually, in some senses, seek them out. So.
And somehow, in the project with the researcher, but also in my practice and with the student at the circus school, I think we are very preoccupied and busy with what was courage before, traditionally, in terms of the circus discipline that we have maintained and just like develop, you know, after one somersault, they come 2, and then 3, and then 4. And then at one point you lose that great value of courage, because it's no longer courageous. You can just like, we have the knowledge now, we know how to learn it, we know how to teach it, and we can push the virtuosity to a max. We can put it higher, we can have 7, then 17, then 70 people doing it. So there's this kind of a relation to spectacularity that is being revised anyway in our environment at Stockholm University of the Arts, and we are wondering what is it to be courageous today? And there's maybe more removal than it's maybe more brave to slow down than to do it faster and with more objects and you know, juggling with more objects and more complex pattern. Maybe we have to remove objects, and maybe we have to slow down processes and include more people than one artist at the center of the stage that takes all the applause.
And now I think, to me, it sounds like you're describing the field of sustainability as well.
Ooh.
At least how we talk about it. Huh? Slow down, not adding things. I mean, that's a lot about that change of mindsets too, that we are talking a lot about when we're teaching sustainability at the business school.
So there is a lot, how can we develop listening when we are practicing circus, and how does it change the virtuosity and how it change our relation? What are the risks to be taken today also is another way of looking at it. Interesting question.
Yeah.
We have in the middle at the top, there is where the mic is. Here comes another question or comment.
I'm a very short person in the very back of the room. Can you see me?
Hey.
Kristen Snyder, I'm at Mid-Sweden University, and I'm a researcher and artist combined, also bridging gaps or bridging different perspectives. But I'd like to thank you for this session. I think that giving the amount of time to both your presentation and now to the panel discussion, it illustrates a very nice methodology that is useful for everybody. It doesn't have to be about just going and studying the circus. You created a space in which you engaged in a dialogue around a word and gave that word space from different perspectives and took time with those different perspectives. If I understand the process correctly, it wasn't just everybody coming together in the room at one time, and really delving down deep inside, and also as well as giving space to revisiting a concept. And I think that those two elements, both revisiting a concept and giving space and time to engaging in a common dialogue from multiple perspectives around an issue or a word or whatever it is, those are the systematic methodologies that we need to be able to embrace in all walks of life, to open up our spaces. And the arts helps us it gives us something to to kind of hook on to that is separate, it's outside of us, and so it's easier to talk about that. But I would like to lift and reinforce the process that you went through as a process that we can all go through wherever we are in whatever organizational context we're in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the great challenge, you know, to find the time outside our silo and outside the research time. And we were quite productive, but also the fact that we decided to engage in conversation and not being obliged to produce something after. Of course, now we're here and we're sharing the process, but we didn't have as a goal to write a paper or to, and also there were some kind of relax in the room, but very much engage and wanting to know from each other.
So what about time?
You have, since we started a bit late, we have this final question or comment here.
Wow, there's a lot of risk to take now. It's the final question, has to make so much impact. I Sreka from Lund University. I'm an international lawyer. And what fascinated me about your presentation is that us lawyers are very scared of ambiguity. We want certainty. We want something that is going to definitely work. But when it comes to the idea of thinking in different systems or sustainability or resilience or regeneration, there is a lot of ambiguity, and that sort of combines all of you guys' approaches as well, that there is a lot of ambiguity in what you do, but you do it anyway. You dance with the ambiguity, you dance with the risks because you do things that haven't been tried before. And systems change or sort of transformation into a more sustainable, more regenerative society also requires that level of sort of being okay with the ambiguity, being okay with the unknown and dancing with it and moving with it. And that's, I think that really inspired me, and I guess we need to learn a lot from different types of art forms that create that level of ambiguity, because I'm assuming that you try a lot of new things and you don't know if it's going to work, and us researchers can learn a lot from that level of unknown, especially in a very fast-paced world where we have to always show some level of result. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about that ambiguity, I guess.
Yeah. And of course, if you speak to circus artists that are freelancing or artists that are freelancing during the pandemic, I think we don't want too much anymore uncertainty. Things has been shutting down and being cancelled, and so I think a bit of stability is important. But it is true that in circus you engage in a present moment, and you have to land, for example, on a wire. If you do a jump and you have to learn, you cannot not be present. You cannot not compose with if there is a sound that comes into the room. And we end up being very specialist in this on the wire, but then when we go on the floor, it's another story. You know, so we become all very specialized in a certain context. What I found interesting in this type of collaboration is that then if we take this condition into another context, then we see pattern can be changed and we can learn new ways of engaging. So that's something to look forward to, be continued.
To be continued, and maybe we have more collaborators here in the audience.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So I would like to thank you all for coming and participating and contributing and sharing, and Emma Stenström and Malena Britz and Andree.
And Tinna, and also you to be here to engage and for your very important work. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Well, Marie-Andree, just to start with you. What an electric, fantastic multimedia talk and performance. Really, really impressive, touching, and something that I will come back to in 2 minutes as well. Emma, Malena, and Tinna, thanks for contributing, sometimes on a short notice, but such greatly and contributing to this. ISDRS wants to just, as a little token of appreciation, plant 10 trees for you each on the One Planet. No, I said this a couple of times, the One Planet Tree, yes, that's an African organization planting trees. And ISDRS just want to give you this as a little token of appreciation. So thank you again. And this sort of marks the end not only of today's second plenary, but I just have the urge to tell you a bit of the background and why this has been so important for the organizing committee, what we have tried to pursue with the conference in its entirety. And we have yet another another day tomorrow, and we have the Sustainability Day, Sustainability Tourist Day on Saturday. But as most of you know, this has been a 3-year project of actually coming to where we are at this week. 3 years ago, we started out with the vice chancellors of several of the universities coming together and saying, yes, let's do this. And yes, let's have the subject of courage, culture, art, and human rights. The original idea, and this was pre-pandemic, you know, it's a long time ago. The idea was that we were starting out in 2019. 2020, we were supposed to come together at the 6 universities campus, 3 in the spring, 3 in the fall, getting to know each other, that staff would come and present ideas to start collaborating. And then during 2021, we would also try to build projects, maybe start building things for the conference, start looking for publication outlets, start looking for other outlets of how to pursue the meeting between science-based research and artistic-based research and artistic practices. And here at the end of the day, we've had singing, we have had photography, we have had sculpture, and we'll have a nice sculpture at the Swedish Defense University that we can look at and feel at tomorrow. We've had dance in the City Hall, we've had aesthetics, and if we would have had more dance if you just knew how things were here, Marie Andree. We've had circus. And this has been what the organizing committee really has attempted to give the ISDRS community, a new insight in other fields that the conferences, the previous 27 one, maybe have not had the opportunity to. And so that's basically what we had tried to do during those 3 years. And we are here today, and we have had a fantastic day with this and very stimulating end. So thank you a lot for putting up with us. We have had much of fun, and I think just that the last project, the project of bringing together, as you have done, you have personalized or personified, well, the idea of trying to bring together many different aspects of this. So thank you, Marie Andree, and thank you, ISDRS community, for taking this as a gift to you. All right, thank you. And I think, Johanna, you're up there coming down. You know, all these practical things, I know we are stressing a lot with being on different campus areas and so. And while we have been on a campus in Bromma on Tuesday, on a campus on Södermalm yesterday at Marie Cederschiöld, and today in Flemingsberg, tomorrow we'll be at 2 campus areas just to top it off. At Stockholm School of Economics in the morning and the Swedish Defense University in the afternoon. Yeah. And walking to get your lunch, you know. So it's, we are breaking so many new things here.
We level up each day. Well, yes, as Peter said, we are at the Stockholm School of Economics in the morning. You have it in the travel manual, it's Sveavägen 65. And then we walk to the Swedish Defense University. What else do I want to say? I have a really important thing. The Swedish Defense University is called that for a reason, and they have higher security levels than the other universities have. So, for those of you going to the dinner after this, by the buses, we will also ask you to write down your passport number or your ID number with the 2 students that are there. If you are not going to the dinner, I will have to ask you to exit and go past the registration table that you passed this morning or whenever you arrived here, and do the same. We have a list for you there. Yes, if you have questions, about the tour number 1, the Archipelago tour, Malin Gavel is the person to talk to. If you are in the hike tour in the nature reserve, you can talk to me. And for the final one, tour number 4, you can talk to Peter Dobers or Johan Gärde, for those of you who know his face by now. Yeah, he's right there, waving away. The schedules will be sent out for tour 3 and 4, and Malin Gavel has already sent it out for the tour number 1. Do you have any questions that are practical questions that you want to take now when everybody's hearing it? Please do. Yes, there's a metro station really close to the Stockholm School of Economics. The tricky part is that it has very many exits. Yes, so it has 2, but it has 2 in each end, and you end up on different sides of the road. So be careful with that one, and keep track of the address, however you do, and look at the map in the travel manual. Yes. For those of you online, I've already emailed you, but we will add another online poster session tomorrow to compensate for today. You guys don't know, but to compensate for today. I'm just saying it again. Yeah. I will see some of you at the dinner. I will come wearing a dress and not this. I will just be there for a little while to say hello. Yeah. That's it for me for now. Yeah.
And now we will soon go for dinner. And as you've seen in the program, there are buses from here. And the buses, they leave, if you go this way, halfway to the restaurant, there are actually exit doors. And there will be students with green vests showing you the buses. You will travel through this area that has once been the periphery and now is transforming into regional city hubs. We have greenery, and you will find some really nice nature, but you will also find some of these areas built in the 60s and 70s with the huge houses where we have quite a lot of segregation and challenges. We will go to Subtopia, a creative cluster, also hosting Cirkus Cirkör. We will not go to the circus tonight. It will be kind of more low-key, and we will have a chance to chat a lot and talk a lot. But we will have a chance also to see a little bit of how they're working with the creative cluster in the suburbs in Alby in this way. There are a lot of different projects and initiatives in this area, because this is really our close surroundings that we are working with. And there's a lot of initiatives also try to bridge the segregation in different way. And on the buses, you will also have a chance to log in. I have put a link to a small presentation of a project called Urban Girls. I put that in the program, so if you click on the buses to Subtopia, you will find this link. There you will have some voices from the suburbs where girls and young women have been involved in actually the city planning and the restoration of their area, Fittja, which we will actually pass on the way. So please listen to the voices of the girls and young women from these areas on the way or later on if you want to do that. We also have some scholars that are doing research and just actually were published in, I don't know if I see Mark here somewhere, in the special issue, right, on urban transformation about these projects. Yeah. So, welcome to Subtopia. We will be there, we will have dinner, we will look at some urban art around Subtopia. When we leave Subtopia, I just want to mention that when I have you all here right away, we will use the metro. It's like 10 minutes to walk to the metro station. And you can walk to the metro station whenever you want to, but we will also make sure that the ones that want to be in a group, that we kind of cluster small groups if you want some company on the way to the subway station and back into Stockholm where your hotels are. The metro line is like 30 minutes to the central station. With that, the buses leave at 6 o'clock, so you will have a time to stretch your legs and write your numbers, your passport and ID numbers.
Oh, is this on?
If you start talk, please.
Is this on? Yeah, this one is on. I'm sorry. I get reminded of one thing, and that is that I can't thank everyone tomorrow in the afternoon because not everyone will be there tomorrow in the afternoon. And one crew, I believe up to 10 persons that have helped out today very, very much is the audio, video, tech crew of this room and of others as well. And I just want to give you guys, students, a big hand.